It can't be doing Britain PLC any favours. I mean, Rupert Lowe put a tweet out at the weekend saying that, you know, talking to some of his friends in business, the world is laughing at Britain right now. They're looking at the government of Britain and they're the laughing stock of the world in business.
Which is true and very sad, but we are heading towards stagflation, where inflation is persistently higher than the Bank of England wants, and yet we've got no growth. And this is all because of the disastrous blunder budget. I mean, the truth is that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, they have crashed the economy.
They have.
I mean,
no question.
They have made the Liz Truss quasi-Kwarteng budget literally look like a walk in the park, a breeze compared to what is going on at the moment. And you cannot grow the economy at a sensible rate, which, by the way, should be 2 to 3% per annum, if you've got these high levels of taxes all over the place. You've got the ever-increasing regulation, risk, and being an entrepreneur doesn't pay in this country, and as or more important of anything is the price of net zero, which is impacting on all our bills, impacting on industries, and that's the key thing. And that's why this laughable sort of announcements about AI. Look, AI can be very smart. Yeah. But it does use a lot of electricity.
It does. Means and we don't have a lot of that.
Well, A, we haven't got enough of it. Come back to that in a second. And B, if you want to be competitive in it, your electricity needs to be cheap. Yeah. And ours is the most expensive in the developed world. Oh, and what happened last week? We nearly ran out of the stuff.
Well, we nearly had a blackout, didn't we? I mean, we were talking to an expert on it this last Thursday, I think it was, and we came literally this close. We came very close. Voluntary blackout.
We were importing in the order of 17%. Of our electricity, I think last Wednesday, it was, at one moment, from our good friends, the French. Yeah. And that's probably not a smart thing to do, sending our money overseas. No. And it's, it's highlighting the absurdity of this net zero obsession that Labour are following the Tories' net zero obsession.
And this is what it says on the front page of the Times, that Labour is courting Chinese investment for its renewable energy revolution. And the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Tice, is saying, you know, this is a national security matter, and he's worried that Ed Miliband is going to do away with any national security concerns because of his mad, ideologically driven push to reach net zero. They basically want the Chinese to have all the wind power companies in this country, and they want them to put assembly plants all over the UK.
What's wrong with buying British? What's wrong with making British? The Chinese, they can't believe our utter negligent stupidity. So we're now sort of buying Chinese wind turbines, buying Chinese solar panels by the few 100 million Mr. Miliband wants, because, of course, they can make it competitively over there because they've got modern-day slave labour markets coupled along with cheap coal-fired electricity. So they're literally pretending at the whole renewables game to make themselves sound good at the big elitist global institutional events and Davos and places like that. So they tick all sorts of boxes, and then they utterly shaft us by selling us this stuff, so that we then produce very expensive electricity.
And then, of course, they then run it all. So if they decide to pull the plug effectively at any point, they can.
Or if they decide to insert some form of malware in all the software that runs all this stuff, then again, they shaft us.
It is absolutely unbelievable.
This stuff it's actually not that difficult to comprehend. And it's just not very good to put any of your critical national infrastructure, including electricity, including things like gas transmission, in the hands of overseas actors who do not have our best interests at heart. And that centres around the Chinese, number one, and the Russians, number two.
Yeah, and then speaking of foreign interference, what about Tulip Sadiq and her campaign leaflets?
Hard to keep up with her
campaign leaflets being found in the palace that was used by her auntie, who was running Bangladesh corruptly for many years and has now been kicked out. I mean, beggars belief.
It's hard to keep up with her burgeoning property portfolio. Yeah. Who paid for what? All we do know is...
All we know she didn't.
Well, she clearly didn't. Right. I think she has now reassessed. The wording was hysterical. Yeah. They've reassessed how she came into possession of her property in London. Yeah. So I think most people listening and watching are pretty clear in their own mind how they paid for their own property. Yes. But she, as a minister of this Labour government, didn't know how she paid for her property. Yes. And by the way, what's her current title?
She's the head of corruption, I believe. Corruption minister.
Presumably she's the anti-corruption.
Oh, sorry, yeah. It's easy to confuse.
Easy to confuse.
I thought she was head of
mind.
corruption.
I mean,
also, she's old Keir Starmer's best friend, you know, and he is like the kiss of death. I mean, if he came over to you and shook your hand, you'd really seriously have to, you know, go and get it disinfected, because everything he touches literally burns down.
It's hard to know which way round it is, but I'm not sure anybody wants to be Keir Starmer's best friend, and equally, he doesn't seem to have many friends.
He has very
Lord
few.
Ali.
Yeah, well, Lord Ali's gone very quiet.
Very quiet.
But
Maybe he's still on holiday.
Yeah, don't worry, though, because Starmer's been quite good friends with old dictator Auntie, because apparently, according to Guido over the weekend, he met the Awami League boss, who's linked to Tulip Sadiq, and the Auntie just last month.
Last month?
Last month, according to Guido.
After she'd been ousted.
Yeah, and he's had her. He's had her at a reception down in the House of Commons when he was leader of the opposition. He's also been out to her gaff while she was, you know, running Bangladesh with a rod of steel. I mean, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
But equally, of course, you know, Keir Starmer rather likes the idea of running things with a rod of steel.
He does.
I mean, his sort of authoritarian, dictatorial approach to running the UK. He's trying to clamp down on free speech.
Yes.
Anybody who's concerned about free speech or child rape gangs, well, essentially, you're linked to the far right, apparently.
I see Labour have now got one chink in the armour, though, because one Labour MP has now come out and said that, yes, there should be an inquiry.
So that's correct. One Labour MP has said there needs to be an inquiry. I think this is going to be a critical week.
Yeah.
And we will obviously be asking more questions in and around the Commons this week. And it may well be that more Labour MPs, having been back in their constituencies, seen the state of their inbox, their emails from constituents, I think some more will essentially sort of join the call for an inquiry. Burnham slightly set the way, calling for a limited national inquiry. I think we're going to see a shift from this government this week. They'll probably fudge it, maybe with a slightly different form of words.
Yeah.
But I just sense something is going to happen. It's unsustainable, this current position. As more and more comes out, over the weekend at our conference in Chester, we had a very brave victim and survivor, Elizabeth Harper, speaking at our conference. The whole place was, including myself, just moved to tears.
Yeah,
it
it's
was
amazing.
Truly,
the stories are awful,
horrific,
aren't they?
absolutely horrific, and more will come out. And you know, we very clearly said, Nigel's repeated it, that if the Labour government doesn't hold an inquiry, then we at Reform, we will organise a separate independent inquiry. We'll make that decision. We'll give them to the end of January. We're generous with time. It's two and a bit weeks away.
Could have a new Chancellor by then.
Well, we could have,
you know, apparently
possible.
she's depressed. Apparently, according to a single cabinet minister who spoke to the Times over the weekend, she's looked at all the options that she's got. There are many, but they're all bad. Not one of them is any good. So even if she lasts until the end of March, the word is that she'll be out by June, if not before.
Well, I think they came in on a platform of stability.
Yeah.
How's that going? On fixing the foundations.
Yeah.
They haven't fixed the foundations. They've literally blown them up and sabotaged
They
them.
really have.
And
government of service, they said.
Yeah, the only thing they're serving is themselves.
Exactly.
And dictators from other countries, it seems to me.
Well, let's have a look.
And gaining lots of air miles.
Exactly right. Yeah, in fact, we're going to do a graph. We're working on it now. We haven't quite perfected it, of who's where at any given point. You know, like those maps they used to have in the Second World War.
Sort of heat map.
Where you just move people around, you know, but now we can do it digitally. I mean, she's in China. I mean, there's normally Miliband will be somewhere in, like, South America. There'll be some, you know, they'll all be in Davos soon. But I must play this again because we played it earlier. Lee Anderson, who clearly has got a second career if he needs to have one on the comedy circuit. This was him in Chester. Was it Chester?
Chester on
Saturday. Have a look.
Look who we've got running the country. Free gear Kia. Rachel from accounts. You know that one, don't you? We've got that famous no-brainer, Angela Rayner. Mad Miliband, the net zero fanatic. And let's not forget our very own mastermind, David Lammy. It's not meant to be funny, this thing, you know. He's a proper charmer, isn't he? Like, listen, I hope nobody's filming this. But keep this one to yourselves. We've got over 6,000 villages in the United Kingdom. And if you took the village idiot from every village, right, and put them 6,000 village idiots into Tottenham, David Lammy would still be the village idiot.
Absolutely brilliant. It brought the house down.
It really is funny. It's so funny.
Lee's on cracking form.
Do give him my best, because that is absolutely, because the timing is impeccable. You know, it's funnier than most comedians out there. Let's have a listen to this voice note from Sam.
So let me get this straight. So security services, ours and around the Western world, have warned about security issues with China, and some are producing certain technical ties. And Rachel from Accounts is letting China in. I mean, I know her boss is Kia John Starling Ping, but blimey, Charlie, it's all going a bit Pete Tong, Mike.
It is going a bit Pete Tong. It's been going Pete Tong for some time now. I just don't know what else can go wrong. You know, while they've got all these problems, as you say, seriously, grooming gangs, economy, NHS, we've got reports saying, you know, something like 500,000 people waited more than 12 hours on trolleys in A&E last year alone. You know, we've got horrendous problems with the civil service. You know, everywhere you look.
The truth is nothing works, and various elements of the public sector are talking about striking again. Yeah. Seems to me the only thing that does actually work is the ability of this government to buy off their union paymasters with ever-increasing wage increases, which, of course, is why we've actually got an inflation problem.
Right.
And this is what... So you've got this sort of doom loop of stagflation, where you've got high inflation, you've got no growth heading towards negative growth, and that... I mean, if we have 2 quarters of negative growth or zero growth at all, then the whole Labour shtick of stability and fixing the foundations, it's in tatters. And then I think she's in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's interesting, for the first time now, we're hearing Labour MPs who'd been very supportive now questioning whether or not she's up to the job.
Yeah.
The next question is, OK, well, who would you replace her with?
Quite.
I mean, surely not our Angela.
Well, certainly not. She can't do hard sums, because she couldn't work out how much she had to take for a tax break on selling of the 2 homes up in Manchester. So, I mean, she's clearly not mathematically adept enough, I don't think. People keep talking about Pat McFadden, but they can't keep giving everything to Pat McFadden, because he seems to be their version of a safe pair of hands. Because I don't like the look of Pat McFadden. I mean, I had him on once. He's never been back since. Because he's the guy who moved next door because the rules changed about what mortgage you could claim in Parliament. So he moved next door, rented the house next door to his, so that he could claim the rent. You kind of go in and so he could rent out his other place. I mean,
well, then he's probably the perfect person to be a chancellor if he's fiddling the books and cooking the books.
And he gave the old Labour line of, he said, well, I didn't do anything that was outside of the rules.
I mean,
well, that's not really the point, is it?
Well, I mean, these are all, in a sense, these are all the hypotheticals if we keep heading south. And that's on a sort of national basis, per person, of course, because of the high levels of mass immigration that are continuing under this regime. Per person, we're getting a lot poorer. And people can feel it.
Oh, yeah.
They can feel it in their pockets. And you look at some of the business numbers, job hirings are down, job vacancies are up.
Companies' national insurance bills are through the roof.
Through the roof.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a lot of anxiety out there, and they've got to reverse course. They've got to adopt the only way out of this is to adopt our plans, which of course they won't do. I mean, they're talking about again, sort of saying we're going to slash government waste and inefficiency. Well, I'm pretty sure in the manifestos and contract, the only one who had that seriously in there, so I'd said you've got to save £5 and 100, and now they're adopting my policy. Well, I mean, you know, it's a form of flattery, but we just know they won't actually do it.
No, because they're in hock to all the unions. As soon as they say anything about removing people from any government department in terms of redundancies or anything like that, they'll just be told, no, you can't do that. And that'll be the end.
And that'll be the end of it. Whereas actually what you've got to do is you've got to make wholesale cuts to quangos, commissions that nobody's ever heard of, value for money departments, this and that.
Well, they've set up about
wholesale review, root and branch is what is required. Because otherwise, you know, this if you keep spending more than you're earning, whether it's at home, at work, or when you're running a country, eventually the lenders say, we're done, folks. And that's the issue with the bond markets. They are very close to saying, we've had enough of this.
And there's
We're
no
not playing
money
game
left.
anymore.
Yeah.
And then there's no money left.
Well, the last Labour government took until the end of their sort of, 12, 13-year term to run out of money. This lot are running out of money after 6 months. So, I mean, at least I suppose they're a bit more efficient at it now than the Blair and Brown Brigade were. Richard Tice, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.